Test Way is a long-distance path that follows the course of the River Test, renowned as one of the world's finest chalk streams. I'm walking along the lower stretches of the Test Way, which, although industrial at times, offers several brief views of the river itself and is a highly varied route. I'm starting in the village of Ealing, on Southampton's waterside. Ealing boasts a working tide mill and quiet quayside that's home to numerous small craft. It's a pretty place, although Southampton's port does muscle in on the background scenery. To get to the start of the main Testway path, you have to go through Ealing Cemetery, which may seem a little morbid, but is really rather pleasant and well kept. It's not long though before you're on the boardwalk, traversing the reed beds and enjoying the gentle flow of Eling Creek. With the River Test flowing out into Southampton water about half a mile to the east of Ealing, the creek at least means that you can be beside water for the first section, and is really rather special. In fact, the whole area adjacent to the creek has been geared up beautifully for short strolls that keep you in contact with water at all times. From this charming footbridge, you can look back to the tide mill and the sluice gates, and also to the path ahead that will lead you on into Totton. We follow the waymarked Testway route through the town of Totton and out onto the Lower Test Reserve. This area floods regularly and is a flourishing wetland habitat. All around, there are small streams and tributaries, all hinting at the presence of a larger body of water. By the time the river reaches this point, it is divided in two and at high tide gathers to the right of the path, forming a small lake. From the bridge, you get your first sight of the river proper, and it's a sight that doesn't disappoint. Moving on, along the edge of the open wetland of the Lower Test Reserve, there's another bridge from which to look out over the river, before heading off into the heart of the main reserve itself. On the horizon there are clear reminders that you're on the periphery of a large city, and that the reserve is shaped by the surrounding industrial sites. But the boardwalk that guides you safely through this swampy heath is a friend, although even this can become submerged on a spring tide. You never lose the industrial influences, but this haunting landscape is captivating, and you feel compelled to just stand and look into the reeds, as if sensing something inside. Further along, the boardwalk is occasionally interrupted by groups of stepping stones. They're a nice feature and a reminder of how people may have crossed boggy ground in the past. And then, there's the most curious of all gates, which you have to admit is highly effective. Once through the marsh area, the route scouts along the edge of a railway line and industrial estate, although you do get one last glimpse of the Test before again it snakes out of reach. You quickly forget the railway line beside you and the industrial installations beyond, because the path trips along the edge of a stream, and to your left soggy fields stretch out towards the river itself. The stream, covered as it was in algae when I walked the route, was like painted concrete, the only hint to its fluidity being the catkins floating on the surface. The Test, meanwhile, had moved out of sight, and only left a few distant clues to its path. Moving on past the cottages on Mill Lane, and down an uninspiring path, the M27 awaits. With the track squeezed between the motorway and a storage yard, it's not a place to linger. Luckily, it's not long before you reach the road and can pass under the motorway, heading back along Church Lane and onto more agreeable tracks and paths towards the Broadlands Estate. This now feels more like a typical country walk than a route supposedly inspired by a great river, and it's best to focus more on the beauty around you than the absence of water. Soon enough, you reach Longbridge Farm, where you're briefly reunited with the test. This bridge offers a wonderfully represented view of the river at its best, and it's easy to see why it's so prized for fly fishing. Whether looking north towards Romsey or south back towards Totton, there's always a reminder that this is as close as you're going to get to the river bank. By this time, it's hard to contain your frustration, and perhaps a sense of injustice, that this magnificent river is kept as a private playground. After an all too brief reunion with the river, it's back to the task and onwards to Moorcourt Farm. This is probably the least interesting section of the whole route, with nothing really but vast fields and a distant wood to hold your interest. Time passes slowly with so little to catch the eye, but I always try and make the best of any location, and there's no getting away from the fact that this is a very quiet and tranquil spot, apart from the faint drone of the motorway in the distance. Once through the farm, you turn and get to see the Test Valley from the opposite side. This is mostly pasture land, and livestock is ever present. But I wasn't really expecting to encounter this kind of herd. The path hugs the edge of the field next to Moorcourt Copse, and the little brook is nice for company. And as the path stretches out ahead, you inevitably wonder if it wouldn't be better to follow the route in the opposite direction. Still, there are pleasant views across the valley to Telegraph Wood, and the going underfoot is easy. It may seem a little harsh to complain about what is undoubtedly a beautiful piece of countryside, but having experienced the waters of Eling Creek, or the boardwalk through the Low Test Reserve, the flat barren fields of the Broadlands Estate do little to excite. This is now little more than a march to the finish, and as you pass Broadlands House, the family home of Lord Mountbatten, thoughts naturally return to the River Test, just visible in front of the house's main lawn. While the river itself may have only played a bit part in the walk, there's more than enough to recommend the route, especially as the town of Romsey is apparently well endowed with tea rooms. If you're looking for a river walk, you'll be greatly disappointed. But if you simply want to soak up some fascinating scenery, the lower stretches of the Testway are hard to beat.